What if your supplements are working against your body instead of with it? Today, I'm taking you behind the scenes with one of the great supplement formulators of our time to discuss how to formulate supplements properly, choosing the best ingredients, determining synergies between ingredients, and using your supplements to actually get the best possible results. So even if you're not interested in professionally formulating your own supplement products and selling those, if your day includes taking multiple supplements or ingredients, in essence, you've become your own formulator. So in this one, we talk about formulation philosophy and working with your biology through a synergy of peptides, botanicals, and ethical ingredient sourcing. What that translates to is supplements that work. Our guest this week has been on the show before. His name is Kyal Van Der Leest. He is a nutritionist, a naturopath, and functional health coach turned supplement formulator. And he founded Level Up Health to create the products he wished he had when he worked in clinics and supplement stores, and for his own use during his own health journey. Level Up's formulations target the root cause of health issues and work on a multitude of biochemical targets in the body. If you want to check out the episode Kyal and I recorded together a while back, you can visit the show notes at mindbodypeak.com/111. Visit the URL outlier.com. That's right, OUTLIYR.com. No longer mindbodypeak. We're now outlier.com/208. for everything we discuss in this episode. And if you want to try the Level Up Health products, you can use the code URBAN, and that will save you 15% on your order. Stick around because next week, Kyal and I dive into particular formulas and why he chose certain ingredients for certain outcomes. My favorite product of theirs is their Total Recomp formula, which is a metabolic optimizer and, as he calls it, exercise and weight loss in a pill. But he also has a solid formula for testosterone boosting called bioanabolic, a novel longevity product called Longevity, a powerful and peptide-based brain supplement called NeuroRegenerate, and then a brand new supplement that's just hitting the market called Mito Blue, and that is a methylene blue-based product. The link to his supplement store will be in the show notes. And tune back in next week for a continuation of this interview, where we also discuss things like why pre-workouts fall short, how to correctly support performance, optimizing the metabolism and mitochondria through supplementation, proper detoxification, with lots of hands-on tips, product breakdowns, and practical approaches. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Kyal Van Der Leest. Kyal, you were back on the podcast in episode 111 a long time ago. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Nick. I was just listening back to that one in prep for our podcast, and I was very happy with it. And I hinted to a lot of the products. I didn't have them at the time, but now they're out. And you got the inside scoop into most of the current Level Up range before it even existed.
Yeah, and I've now tested most things I think that you've put out there. And one of the things that I love about the way you do things is you don't just copy the formulas that everyone else is putting out. You really innovate and create next level, next generation formulas. And today I want to explore some of the different categories of products that you've created. I guess formulas in those categories. And then also to understand how you formulate in general and how you think about what's going to be the most efficacious and ideally with a really high safety profile.
Yeah, so the industry is saturated. That's one thing that's absolutely no doubt. You go to a biohacking conference, there might be 30 different brands doing some version of a longevity product or some tea booster. So my thinking is, how can I innovate this and really push the envelope? Obviously, with my formulas, peptides have been the primary thing. That's the point of difference. I don't have them in everything, but there's certainly new era ingredients that I spoke about on the last one and I'll speak about today. Things like horny goatweed, for example, is a test booster. That's been used for decades. I remember as a kid laughing about it when I saw it in the supermarket, in the grocery store, laughing about that. But that's been around for ages because of primary constituents in it, such as icarin, that's a PDE5 inhibitor that helps the same mechanism as Viagra, essentially. So these constituents, these ingredients have always sort of existed in naturopathy, but the new era of supplementation is, I guess, science has unlocked the ability to extract these like salitricides from rhodiola or cordycepin from cordyceps and kind of turn it from a full spectrum herbal extract into more of a targeted, almost drug-like effect, but coming from something natural. And peptides are not too dissimilar to that, like the thymus gland peptides like TB500 or even dihexa that comes from the brain, or epitalon that's from the pineal gland, BPC that's from your gastric juice. Finding the best of what our bodies inherently have, or what the plant world has and utilizes for things like resveratrol. We can isolate that. It's basically sunscreen for plants that has really strong antioxidant effects in the human body as well. That's how I like to formulate with Level Up, is just to use these really powerful constituents, or even probiotics, postbiotics. Just there's so many things now, and this is like I've said, it's like a golden age of supplements at the moment, where there's just so many things coming out all the time. There's innovative companies doing these extracts, like companies like NMB Nutrition, NMB and TSI. They like even the paraxanthine that we speak about too. Like, we are getting so much more intelligent at providing ingredients for the supplement industry. And with people like Robert Kennedy in power now as the Secretary of Health, I really have a lot of optimism that on a macro level, these things from our niche of biohacking and our sort of non-mainstream thinking will infiltrate the mainstream thought and start to get more use and more awareness around it.
Yeah, you've already mentioned a couple of them, like paraxanthine is one. It's now getting a lot of recognition. Same is methylene blue. That's been blowing up in like the cultural general awareness, and biohackers have been talking about these things and using them for a lot longer than general public. And it's cool to see them becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, exactly right. But I kind of, now that I've got a position in the industry, I really want to try and lead by example by not using crappy fillers, by minimizing the things used like sucralose and ACE and aspartame, all these other things that are more in the bodybuilding space, but just doing it as well as I can is been my methodology, because ultimately I'm the first person to use these products, and if the business ends, I will absolutely cockhold them all and be the last one to use them as well. So like, it's from selfish perspectives too. Like, I just want the best product for myself. I'm inherently don't want to take a pill organizer like my grandma would have with her medicines full of 40 different supplements. Like, funnily enough, I simplify it down, but still end up doing that anyway, because it's so many different formulas now. With the brand that was meant to simplify supplements has now got like 30 of them. But yeah, things like the GI repair that we spoke about is like a protocol, a gut protocol in just one product. Botanabolic is, I think there's like 12 different botanicals and ingredients, probably less, more like 10, but that is like a test boosting protocol in one bottle. And that's essentially like the results of what drives the formulation. When I formulate, I look at, if like brain health, for example, if that's something you want to target, well, how would you, rather than looking at the ingredients first, I look at the mechanisms first, like BDNF, boosting BDNF, what's currently in the ether. Lion's mane, people have been talking about that. It's gained a lot of popularity just in mainstream. Even people like Jeremy Clarkson, he's a British guy. He was growing it on his show in Amazon, and it got a lot of popularity from that. And people just talk about these things pretty generically. But, lion's mane is kind of old news, and it's not bad by any means. It's fantastic. And that's why I'd use that as a formula. And that's like an entry point for people. Oh, it's got lion's mane in it. And then you can then go on to educate them about dihydroflavone, DHF, which is like super lion's mane. Or you can say, hey, if you're boosting BDNF with lion's mane, then maybe you've heard of dihexa. It's like 7 times more potent than endogenous BDNF, or P21 or cerebrolysin, these other peptides, which work similarly but significantly stronger than these botanical things. And then what happens if you combine them? Well, that's kind of my mad scientist way of formulating. Well, if this is good and this is good, and then you use things to enhance blood flow, And then maybe there's acetylcholine booster, then that's going to give you on the front end a bit of a nootropic boost. Then you've got a pretty powerful formula that's, simplifies this big 5, 6, 10 product stack into sort of 1 to 2 capsules.
Yeah, I like that. So you're taking the perspective, the approach of first looking at the outcome. What do you want to do? So you want to improve brain health and performance. Then how do we go about that? What are the different mechanisms that we know of? And then choosing the ingredients after that. You're not taking 1 or 2 or a handful of ingredients and then formulating products around those ingredients, are you?
No, exactly. When an older product I have is called Complete Liver Complex. There were 7 things I wanted to achieve with the product. That was to support all 6 of the conjugation phase 2 pathways. I didn't see a product out there that supported all of them. And then the other part of it was to recycle glutathione. So those were the goals. And then I sort of reverse engineered it to, bring in some NAC, some taurine, choline, ALA, and what are the other ones, like selenium, molybdenum, all those sort of things, because they're the cofactors or the precursors or whatever it is that goes into targeting these pathways. And that's essentially how you get the effect, right? It's like, how do I want to, macroscopically, I want to improve my liver. Then you've got to go down a level like, all right, how does the liver work? Phase 1, intermediary phase, phase 2, and clearance. All right, well, there's a lot there. So maybe let's work our way back. Things like globe artichoke will clear and help with bile flow. And then you've got NAC for glutathione synthesis and recycling, and then all the other cofactors too. So every product has my best attempt. I might miss a few mechanisms here or there, but my best attempt to sort of hit all of the systems that go into a certain health goal.
And how are you settling on the dosages you're going to use? Because if you're taking an individual isolate, it might be 1 dose, but if you're taking it in conjunction with a bunch of other ingredients, perhaps you're going to use a smaller dosage. And then there's also going to be the influence of bioindividuality. Like perhaps most people do better with 600 milligrams of NAC than 500 or 800. And then I'm asking these questions because whether or not someone actually wants to become a supplement formulator and start their own business or not, if you're taking multiple products at home, essentially you're becoming a supplement formulator to some degree because you're creating your own formula that perhaps no one else is taking. So it's helpful to know some of these things and how you're making these decisions.
Yeah, well, always when I choose an ingredient, I try my best. Sometimes it's restricted by how much you can fit in the capsule, but I always try my best to get it within the clinical dosage range that, you can find in studies if they're done on humans. If not, it's kind of like, then you have to, with peptides, go maybe a little bit gray area into forums and people. Honestly, the forums for peptides are almost as good as the clinical studies because I think there's more human research done in those in an informal setting than there ever will be in a formal setting because of them not being patentable drugs that, companies and pharmaceutical models want to pour millions of dollars into. But basically understanding, all right, this is the range, this is the hypothetical range for peptides, or with something like NAC, as you said, there's very clear set guidelines for what the minimum effective dosage is. I would probably aim for somewhere in the middle of that and, just sort of play around with it before I'd, bring a product out to market. And then understanding synergy. When you combine ingredients, like the net sum of 1 ingredient plus 1 ingredient might be 3. So you'd probably need significantly less of those 2 to achieve the same outcome. And that's because instead of like with NAC, for example, if that's the only thing you're taking for liver health, you are going to improve your liver health. It will help with phase 2 glutathione conjugation pathways, and it will help recycle glutathione. So you're hitting on 2 of those 7 targets that I sort of said with the liver complex that I would target, and you will get some inroads. But by combining NAC with glycine, with taurine, with molybdenum, then you kind of, and all the other things I use, or even DHM as we discussed last time, you're helping the liver in multiple ways, and you need less of the NAC because by supporting the other 5 pathways, the 2 that NAC supports don't have too much of a burden, or there's not too much put on those ones to achieve that outcome. And nootropics would be a similar thing to liver detoxification, where like when you look at neurotransmitters in the brain, if you want to improve your cognitive function, You can look at supporting dopamine, and maybe you just take something like macunapurians to just give you the direct precursor to dopamine and you feel fantastic. But there's so many different neurotransmitters in the brain. There's so many different ways you can improve your cognitive performance that if you're only pushing one pathway, then the dose of macuna is higher than if you were to just say, all right, I'm going to take some L-tyrosine, some NALT, or, some Bacopa, some ginkgo, and some macuna, then you need less of all of them to achieve that final outcome. So yeah, how do you formulate? Well, honestly, try it out yourself. Try not to hurt anyone by overdoing things. With macuna, like I've got nootropic products now. I'm not using that one because that has potential for dopamine receptor downregulation. There's a few other issues with it as well, so I wouldn't use that one. But things like ginkgo and bacopa, these are traditionally used nootropics that just improve blood flow, improve dopamine, synaptic formation. They're fantastic, and they're very, very long use with a very well-established safety profile. So you can use those ones. Things like huperzine A, very, very robust evidence for it improving outcomes with things like Alzheimer's. As an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, it's really good at giving you a boost in cognitive function. So I won't get too deep into that one, but essentially, yeah, you dose it conservatively, understand synergy, and also make sure when you source these ingredients, you source them correctly. So you're actually delivering what it is that you are trying to achieve, not, using like TUDCA we spoke about before. That's a fantastic single ingredient that's a bile salt that reliably, if you're using pure TUDCA that's tested, will lower your liver enzymes by supporting bile flow, by feeding the bile and taking the burden off the liver. But purity and testing is important. And often if a product, like if you're buying on Amazon a product that's $12 for like 90 capsules that's meant to support your liver, there's a good chance, there's a very, very good chance that that's not going to be dosed properly. Probably has a proprietary blend that might use the cheapest possible ingredient that makes up 90% of the capsule, and then all the other ones that it claims to have in there. There's no obligation for it to be more than 1 milligram if the effective dose is, 800. So avoid proprietary blends. I always say proprietary blends are the coward's way to make a product because I understand people can't copy what you've done, but at the same time, then you can't claim to have a clinically dosed product with integrity. And there's nothing stopping one batch being done right and then the next one being completely done wrong. And that's why I'll never do proprietary blends with my products. And I think when people look at buying things, they'll always avoid them. And if the price is too low and too good to be true, it generally is.
Yeah, those are all great tips. And when I see proprietary blends, I always, not always, almost always steer the opposite direction. There's the edge case where I know the person, I know they're trustworthy, and then I will use it and I'm like, still, can you tell me what's in here? I want to know the details, the exact dosing I'm getting, because you don't know if you're getting the clinical dose, and also you don't know if you're going to be getting overlap between this and another product you're taking, and you don't want to, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes there's toxicity if you're getting too much.
Yeah, exactly. One that I had to really be careful with was alpha GPC. I thought this is fantastic. I first started using it. My focus was up. My verbal fluency was really high. Then I started getting migraine-like headaches because one of the products I was using had significantly more alpha GPC than I thought. They had it dose based on an 8-gram scoop, yet the scoop was significantly larger. It was more like a 12 to 13. So between that and another product I was taking, which had a little bit of it, I definitely went over the safe level and was getting really bad headaches from it. There's always seemingly an inverse bell-shaped curve where there's the right dose for everyone. Too much is possibly problematic. Too little's not going to be any effect. There's a Goldilocks zone in the middle where and what that dose is what you said before, bioindividuality. Everyone's got different genetics. Everyone's got different burdens on their body, be it, toxic burdens, be it, genetic issues with a certain enzyme or pathway. So what one man's favorite supplement like ashwagandha might be another one's anhedonia where they don't feel any good. So it's really That's why experimenting with these things, also working with someone who's like a professional or an expert advisor who's done what you and I have done, where they've experimented with hundreds of compounds and can provide these insights. That's really important as well.
Yeah, and also for the substances that are older, it's much easier to find information on them, whether it's anecdotal or it's clinical. Oftentimes it's not clinical because no one's going to be making billions off of an ashwagandha extract unless it's a patented version. And then even then, but like you can find a lot of reports online of the things that people are experiencing, the negative side effects, if there are any. But then also like the newer molecules, that's where I'm a little more cautious because you don't know, like there's not as much research on them, obviously, and there's less anecdotes. And that's when I do a little more research. But if it's like an ancient adaptogen that's been used for thousands of years, they tend to have a pretty decent safety profile. Or if it's not a decent safety profile, you can at least find information around it.
Yeah, well, I'll give you one perfect example of a product that I have that now we have it's the only one that I'm like, maybe I shouldn't sell it, but it's very good. It's called tesofensine. Tesofensine is on paper this amazing weight loss appetite suppressant, like an alternative to GLP-1s, and it works really, really well as a thermogenic. I tried it from other companies at 500, micrograms, milligrams or micrograms. I'm pretty sure it's micrograms. I got the appetite suppressant effects and I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to make this under Level Up, but I'm going to do it really conservatively at 125 micrograms a capsule because I've seen like all these issues with, potential serotonin syndrome being a neuropeptide, a neuro small molecule that works as a triple uptake inhibitor of serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. Like there is a bit of risk with this one, but I pushed forward through it. Sold about 80 bottles, and then the feedback started coming through that, oh my goodness, I'm sweating buckets for 4 hours. I'm salivating like a bulldog. I feel absolutely like I've had cocaine, and I'm like, okay. Let's pull this from public sale and put like a warning on it. If people want to get it, then they need to read the fine print and start low on it. Like it's very good. It certainly works as an appetite suppressant, as a thermogenic. There's nothing more potent that I've ever taken. When I overdosed it at 250 micrograms of my one, which has L-beta, which is also a thermogenic, a mitochondrial uncoupler, and what's the other one? GBB, the precursor to L-carnitine. That combination of those three, I was sweating. I don't know if you've tried it personally, our one, but my goodness.
Yeah, a long time ago, I actually had a very similar story. I had used a number of times the 500 microgram version from other companies. And I'm like, oh, it's only 125 in Kyl's product. Like, this is nothing. I can take multiple. Luckily, I didn't take multiple. I just took the one. And then half an hour later, I felt like I was in a sauna and I was like sitting on a towel, just like sweating. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. And I think I sent you a voice message. I'm like, am I okay? Am I going to live through this? And I'm like, wow, okay. It's interesting because the other company had their third party COA saying that it was pure and everything. And the potency difference was massive. So I see what you mean there.
Yeah, which always makes me wonder, like, this is the state of the industry at the moment that I said before, is like, you can get all these COAs, but then like what batch was that done on? And they guarantee that the dose that they put in it, like you can get your COA, but there's no COA that you put exactly the microgram or milligram amount in each capsule. There's no proof of that. You just tested the raw before it's gone into the big batch and then mixed up and sent. So this is my gripe with, like, if you go on Amazon and you want to find BPC, you can probably buy it for less than $50 for something that our product is $200. And you look at the reviews, they're like 1 star, because have they even put BPC in it? Probably not at that price. Or if they have, and they've claimed it's at this much. Like Sean Wells did a video where he said like 80% of products on Amazon aren't meeting the dosages of which they claim to deliver. And then 20% of them don't even have the actives that they actually claim to be in it. So this is the issue with the supplement industry at the moment. And like pharmaceuticals and the big pharma models, I hate it in principle, but at least they're giving you what you're after. Like there's very strict standards. If they underdose a medicine or something, they're in trouble. But the supplement industry, powders, pills, there's so many different companies popping up nowadays. And, you know, to be completely honest, like there's nothing stopping me like halving the dose of BPC and doubling my profits, but I just ethically promise I will never do that. And I hope people call me and test me on that, because I hand on my heart will never ever do that. But there's very little stopping any business from doing that. So having really strong principles, like I don't know if I got into the ethical reasons of why I started Level Up in our last one, but I've had a lot of illness in my life. My mum had cancer for 8 years. So a lot of the products that I've developed and a lot of the ingredients I know come from a perspective of I'm trying to fix this illness of which, there's very little hope. She was given like 2 years to live and lived 8 with all the alternative therapies, the hyperbarics, mitochondrial therapies, the push pulse stuff, intravenous therapies, and the most extensive supplement routine that, it was my life, basically trying to figure out, all right, green ECGC and resveratrol and all these other things are going to support her. So I'd go online, I'd buy it, I'd have a budget, regrettably. So I'd sometimes go the cheaper one. But from my perspective, like I'm using this for a medical purpose. I need to know that what I'm giving my mum or taking for myself for mold detoxification or taking for my partner for preconception support, I need to know that the ingredients that I am taking are exactly what's listed on there. And that's why now I don't ever skimp on testing for my brand. So I know that I'm delivering what I promise on the label. But then when I buy other brands, I'm like going to go for the one that's probably a bit more expensive or a bit more of a recognizable brand, because I'm like, I'm not in the business of wasting time anymore. I don't want to slow down the results that I'm expecting or not get them at all by just saving $10 on a bottle and going at unknown entity or an unknown brand. Like there's nothing saying that that won't be what you're after, but there's also that risk that you don't ever want to take. So my reasons for doing this is I genuinely want to make a difference in the world. That's like the legacy I want to leave, and the products are doing that for now. And I will do my best efforts to continue to make sure that they do that. And I think the world needs this shift. Like there's so much disease. Most people have some level of illness, especially in America, and pharmaceuticals aren't cutting it. So now's the time for supplements to step up, do it right, and sort of take over.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. It's interesting on the Amazon front. I always avoid Amazon when I can because there are so many issues with their supplements. You even look at the reviews sometimes. It's like 1 star, took too long to arrive. 5 stars, arrived very quickly. It's like, well, that has nothing to do with the actual product itself. And even then, a lot of the reviews are created by bots and they're not actual like humans didn't actually even consume the product. And then it's like, this company has 5 products and they have no presence, no digital presence, no physical presence, never heard of them. Like no one I know has ever heard of them or used them. And not only are you risking not getting the therapeutic effect that you're looking for, but in a lot of cases, as third-party reports constantly show us, these things can contain other potentially banned substances, toxic substances, like heavy metals, microbes, things that you don't want to be consuming. So not only are you getting no beneficial effect, but you can even be getting a negative effect while thinking you're getting a high-quality product at a great price.
Yeah, this touches on peptides, especially the injectable ones. I don't sell injectable ones, regulatory challenge, but there are other companies that do. And never, ever, 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 ever cheap out on your injectable peptides because of LPS, heavy metals, contaminants. 100% of what you inject ends up in circulation and can go on to cause issues. People who are anti-vaxxers will avoid vaccines for the adjuvant, the heavy metals, and yet they are going to risk taking heavy metals every day, every 3 days with injectable peptides. It's kind of like, well, that's such an issue here. No, you need to make sure it's not an issue over here as well. So always get really good quality injectable peptides. Oral peptides, it's not as important. We do test for all those things. It's on our website, the purity reports for every batch of peptides. Not every ingredient we use is tested. We have very, very good, very reputable suppliers who we just get the manufacturing reports from them. But yeah, injectable versus oral, you don't absorb 100% of if like we had a really contaminated BPC, which we don't. But if you did take it contaminated BPC, you'd only absorb 0.1%, provided you didn't have extensive hyperpermeability of the gut. You'd only absorb about 0.1% of most heavy metals like aluminium or mercury versus injectable. 100% of that's ending up in circulation. So yeah, always source your injectable peptides from a really reputable supplier.
Yeah, and LPS and the injectables is an issue, and LPS is extremely inflammatory and dangerous in high levels. And are you seeing that in general, when people have gut dysbiosis, which is a large portion of the population, they're still able to absorb and assimilate the peptides through the gut lining, and they're still having the same biological effects? Because I know in certain cases, people are advised to use the injectables if they have like a really compromised gut.
Well, it depends which peptide you're trying to absorb. If it's ones like the neuropeptides that we have, for example, like a liposomal delivery of these things will make it work regardless kind of your integrity, because the fat absorption, provided that's not compromised, as you just might not have a gallbladder, then yeah, probably the fat absorption, or you could do sublingual versions that would work better. But the gut peptides, I have two forms of GHK. I have it non-liposomal and liposomal. The liposomal form is to get it systemic as best as possible, to have anti-aging effects, to have effects on the skin. But then the non-liposomal form is for it to directly interact with the gut lining, to have the same effects as it would have on your skin, on your inner skin, which is your gut lining. And if you were to take injectable BPC for gut health, that's probably not going to work as well as if you were to take an oral capsule that's going to get delivered to a compromised gut lining. These things do absorb pretty easily without the need. Like, it's larger proteins that might be more compromised and more difficult to get absorbed, but they can act locally on the gut and then end up absorbed systemically. So if you were to take a peptide for a distal injury, then injectable's better. But for GI repair, it is going to be the better of the ways to deliver the gut peptides, and then natural ones too. But yeah, like what's another one I got? TB4 fragments, for example. If you were to take that one, we are liposoming it now, so this will become obsolete once this airs. But our prior one had sulfoprosate sodium, and that is an interesting peptide absorption enhancer, because paradoxically, the worse your leaky gut is, possibly the better your peptide absorption will be, right? Because these large molecules, like, you've got this thing called the 500 kilodalton rule about peptide absorption through the skin and your gut. But if you bring in a sulfoprosate sodium, that's deliberately causing a transient increase in paracellular permeability to allow the peptide to get in better. They've even got 200 milligram, which is a massive dose of sulfoprosate sodium with tirzepatide and Ozempic as an oral capsule. And it's very large. Normally it wouldn't work, but that combination causes such a bad transient leaky gut that the peptide actually is getting in and having oral effects as an oral peptide, an oral semaglutide. So, I don't think permeability really affects the peptide absorption too much. But when it comes to nutrient absorption, mineral absorption, all the supportive things, then definitely can, because if you've got minerals are absorbed through certain receptors. They don't just passively diffuse, or they're not absorbed through liposomes. Fat-soluble vitamins being something different. But, everything has its own way of getting into the body. And to say, I've got compromised gut, therefore I don't absorb everything, that's not necessarily true. And conversely, I think you might absorb peptides better and maybe the best thing for you to take, versus I'm going to take zinc to help my gut. Yeah, that will help, but how much of the zinc are you going to absorb with like metalloprotease issues or things like that? So
after our last conversation, you convinced me to do a deep dive into TUDCA, and I did that, and I used it for a while, tried all kinds of different dosages, and I realized if someone's taking a lot of different substances, say herbs, which are notoriously contaminated with heavy metals and other stuff that you don't want, especially from the more affordable sources, it makes sense to help your liver and body process things more efficiently to support it with like something like TUDCA. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a legit strategy that might help?
I mean, it depends how many things you're throwing at yourself, right? Like TUDCA is just going to help phase 3. And if you and me are probably the same, we probably in one day have 100 different things from our food and our supplements coming, of which most things require peptides being most peptides being an exception. But most things, almost everything is processed through your liver or your kidneys, even natural things. If you overdo it on natural things, then you can have issues with, overwhelming all of those phase 2 detoxification pathways and the conjugation pathways. And even certain probiotic species, like depends on what your gut bacteria are doing. If you've got, gram negative, gram positive, overgrowths of fungus or bacteria, then they all produce postbiotic things. They could be good things like urolithins, or it could be bad things like LPS. Everyone's bioindividuality is so different. But by taking something like TUDCA, there's, again, like this bell-shaped curve to the perfect amount. If you don't have enough TUDCA, you'll end up with fat in your stool that's being absorbed, and you'll end up with a movement that floats in the toilet, and you can see like fat in it. And in that case, TUDCA is great. The opposite end is you end up getting what's lovely. It was described by one of my mentors as the squirts, where you just don't have a formed bowel, and you can see like bile and yellow in the bowels too. So again, it kind of comes down to this Goldilocks zone. If you're a bodybuilder and you're taking oral Anavar that's going to tank your liver, or other steroids, or if you're a biohacker like Brian Johnson and you probably take 100 supplements a day, then yeah, probably give your liver a little support with another supplement. But this one's going to work in synergy with what your body is meant to be doing anyway with bile.
Would it also help you absorb fat-soluble substances more effectively? Like I know nutrients, like the vitamins, the fat-soluble vitamins, but what about like, say, nootropics that are fat-soluble also?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, A, D, E, and K, TUDCA helps the absorption of those. So if like a liposomal peptide or anything that's fat-soluble, it will absorb better if you're making bile and you've got, a bile salt or an ox bile. With our TUDCA now, we have 3 different iterations of it. We just had the one at the start, but for some people who are in mold like myself, 500, if it's the first time you're using it, that will give you the worst Herxheimer, because you're clearing all the mold toxins and all the backlog that's in your liver. So we have a lower dose with taurine, which is like the gentle approach to doing it, which honestly, I am more of an advocate for now than just going whole hog on it. When it comes to detoxification, it's just a low and slow process. You don't want to create excessive inflammation in a body that's already overburdened. Then the other one is just to support fat digestion and liver health at the same time, which is our TUDCA ox bile product, which we only released about 2 weeks ago. And people were like, "Oh, I take ox bile. Can I take TUDCA too?" I'm like, you know what? We should just combine the two. That's cover all bases. Ox bile will help, and TUDCA will both help with fat absorption and digestion. People who don't have a gallbladder, like that is almost your daily staple. That is a medicine, not a supplement, to take that every day.
And that's ox bile contains TUDCA as one of the active ingredients in it?
Yeah. It's TUDCA, UDCA, deoxycholic acid, like a spectrum of all the bile acids are in desiccated ox bile, and then TUDCA is probably the most beneficial of that. So by taking the best of that bile combined with the rest of it, you've got a really good full spectrum of bile acids.
By taking bile acids, you're not going to downregulate your natural production.
Oh, well, the people who need them the most are going to not have a gallbladder, but you don't tend to do that. No, TUDCA isn't natural. TUDCA itself is actually dependent on you having specific bacterial populations that conjugate UDCA, which your body can make, with taurine. So if you're a vegan and you're not getting any significant amount of taurine in your diet, you're not going to have a very good liver health, potentially, because of a lack of taurine, unless you're fortifying your diet or you're supplementing taurine. And you also need the right bacteria species, which is where bioindividuality comes in. I've forgotten the bacteria species off the top of my head, but there's a certain one that helps conjugate that taurine with the UDCA in your bowel, and then the TUDCA then gets reabsorbed or used in the gut. So yeah, it's a complicated one, and I don't think it's one that downregulates because your body doesn't make TUDCA as that molecule, and I don't think taking TUDCA is going to downregulate your deoxycholic acid production. And again, like if you don't have enough cholesterol too, that's the most upstream of all the bile acids. They're all made from cholesterol, so not avoiding eggs or being on statins might result in deterioration in liver health and impaired fat absorption too. So there's so many mainstream, or maybe you're trying to do the right thing in your health and you've just been misinformed and you've gone vegan, or your doctors put you on statins so you don't absorb cholesterol. Well, then you're not going to have CoQ10, and then you're probably not going to make bile acids properly. So there's just so many different landmines when you, take some bad advice that result in problems. So
that's one side. You mentioned a couple different things and considerations when you're building supplement stacks. Another thing that I noticed that you do differently, which I don't know why no one else does, it seems so intuitive and obvious, is that when you have an active ingredient in, say, a capsule that holds 500 milligrams of substance, say the peptide takes up half of a milligram or 1 milligram, you have 499 free milligrams to use. Most people fill it with like really cheap fillers like magnesium stearate and silicone dioxide. A lot of them, you don't do that. You actually add functional ingredients as the filler.
Yeah, why? Why would you? I mean, money, but that's fundamentally it, isn't it? Like a rice flour or a cellulose, microcrystalline cellulose is for a whole production run probably $5 versus if I use PEA, which I use for most of the peptides, it's going to add a significant cost per unit, not just for the whole production run. So yeah, it's a decision, financial decision that businesses make, and I understand it. If all people really wants the active, then does it really matter what the rest is? In my opinion, yes, you'll get the product to work better. But other people's don't necessarily need to do that. So, I mean, each to their own, but I definitely want PEA as an anti-inflammatory, as a painkiller to work with BPC, which is going to then address the root cause of why you'd need a painkiller and an anti-inflammatory to begin with.
I know you have a postbiotic metabolite of this in one of your products. Did you consider using Shilajit or fulvic humic acids, anything like that, to enhance absorption across your formulas?
So estrogen is one that we're going to start using to enhance amino acid absorption. Bioperine is another one that people use, and that works like selcoprosate sodium. It creates transient permeability. What was it again? The fulvic humic. I haven't seen good evidence that does increase absorption of other ingredients. So I've not really it's not been on my radar, but the estrogen definitely has. In something like the tributyrate that you're talking about, the postbiotic of butyrate, that is going to not need to have improved permeability or absorption because that will get used by the enterocytes directly from the gut. It doesn't necessarily need to enter circulation. So for that particular one, that nuance, it's probably not necessary. But absorption enhancers, I have pivoted towards liposomes. I think they are the gold standard in getting things into the body. Whether it's necessary for a compound or not, that's sort of where you have to do your intelligent discernment. Like I've not bothered liposoming BPC. I don't think it makes any significant difference to absorption. With what I've done already with just delayed release capsules and bicarbonate, like that's protecting it for the most part. And then it gets into the ileum and can absorb at about an 80 to 90% rate orally versus other things like GHK.
Compared to what's a typical BPC? It's not arginate. It's the other form of BPC?
Acetate's the one that people inject. That has a weak bond to the peptide.
But what do the cheap oral supplements use that is not the, I think it's not the arginate
There's
form?
a few different forms and you can custom synthesize now. So you could probably just put it on whatever you want. Very expensive to do that. So that's why it's not happening yet. And arginate's working really well anyway. That's used to be called Diogen, which was the most orally bioavailable form. And it was studied for bioavailability by that company until they lost their patents. So now that's why it's no longer Diogen and everyone just uses arginate BPC. The acetate's what you'd inject. Does not need to be arginate if you're injecting it. Injection just bypasses the need for it to be bound to the arginine salt. And it will, I think the estimates from Diogen is about 80 to 90%. It withstands, even without these acid buffers, it withstands the acid for 6 hours at about an 80% rate. If you put an enterically coated delayed release capsule, then it's not even having to be exposed to the acid theoretically, or if it is, then, the capsule's probably broken. That's not the point of a delayed release capsule. But then you've got things like bicarbonate, and just simply by not taking it with food, your stomach acid's not going to be as high. So intelligent delivery of peptides and of all molecules and all nutraceuticals is how you make them work better. And that's why liposomes I honestly see as you can take them sublingually. You can use even liposomes to improve penetration of things through the skin barrier, or liposomes to get into the brain. Yeah, if your liposome a larger peptide, like fats get through your skin better than if they're just sort of sitting there. That every ingredient has its tendencies to be more fat soluble or more water soluble or work at better pHs. So, but liposomes are how I've attempted to get GHK to work better systemically. As I said, I don't always liposome it for the gut effects, but TB4, the AC fragments, the active fragments of TB4, aka natural TB500, If you don't buffer them and you don't liposome them, you're probably only going to get about a 10% survival of these, 10 to 20% survival of these. Same with KPV and GHK. Like, they are weaker than BPC. BPC is made in the stomach acid. So even if you were to take acetate, you still probably get 30 to 40% of it, provided you don't have really strong acid churning at that point in time.
When you say take acetate, you mean if you were to orally consume acetate?
Exactly, yeah. So no capsule. You just take your injection and not inject in your mouth, but just shoot the solution and drink it. Like, it will have some local effect as well. Like, it doesn't not work. It just doesn't work to the level that you'd need it to. And then if you wanted it to work on a distal injury, like a RSI on your wrist or a golfer's elbow or something, you wouldn't get any significant amount of it. So that's why using the forms like arginate are better. And then liposoming, honestly, is my way. It's like the third layer of protection. So I'd have a delayed release capsule. I'd have some acidity buffer like bicarbonate or sulfoproteate sodium. And then the liposome as well is like, you've got 3 ways to protect the peptide and then the liposome to improve delivery systemically. That's an intelligent formula. And that's how I like to do things, right? So doing that properly is very difficult, very time consuming, and very expensive. So the newest product I have that I hinted to on the last one is called NeuroRegenerate. It's got a triple liposomal neuropeptide combination of N-acetyl-C-Max, P21, and dihexa. This is possibly boring to people. So if you don't care about manufacturing processes, skip this next minute. But to get these right, you have to custom synthesize most of these peptides because they're very difficult to source. And P21 specifically, is not much of it out there. Then you have to liposome them in liquid, as most liposomes are liquid and you take them as a liquid. But I don't like liquids and they don't have a very good stability. So then we freeze dry it, which takes about 3 weeks in a freeze dryer. And then along the way, you have to test the liposomes to make sure they're still stable. And if you do it too fast or too slow, then the stability of the liposomes might be compromised. So it's kind of like baking a cake. You have to do it right. And, there's a lot of companies doing liposomes now, and all they might do is just put some phospholipids with an ingredient and, give it 5 minutes and say, done. But in reality, you don't have a liposome. You've just got phospholipids that are broken down after 5 minutes after you've liposomed them and the other active ingredient. But to do it right is a very expensive, time-consuming process. And that's honestly, I apologize, but that's why the product is so expensive. And doing it right, the more we do it, the cheaper it'll get. But for the first run, it's just been this exorbitantly expensive process that there's no getting around it. I can't not make a little bit of money off a product. So to do that right with the GHK and now with NeuroRegenerate has been a process, but not necessary for BPC and other things. You can get away with not doing the very expensive liposoming process.
Wow. I did not realize the process to formulate NeuroRegenerate is that intense.
Well, we spoke about it in 2023. I hinted that I was going to bring it out, and it didn't launch until about 4 months ago. So it's been a very long process to do it right. And we had to do so many different runs, and we got the universities to test the liposomes to make sure they were still stable. And they're stable, but my goodness, it took a while and had to upgrade equipment. And oh my goodness, I won't rant about manufacturing too much. I'll get back to relevant things for people.
I want to explore that formula because you mentioned it's a nootropic. I've talked about those a bit on the show previously, and those are basically substances that improve cognitive function, brain health, other related facets of human performance and wellness. Why would someone want to use NeuroRegenerate instead of the perhaps original nootropic, which is the simple combination of caffeine or coffee and a little bit of L-theanine?
Well, you can use those. They're going to be a transient boost to your neurotransmitters. But this one, I kind of like the purpose behind this isn't to make people's brains just be like, go. I've had a bang energy or a monster energy. Like, you can get really good cognitive effects from caffeine, L-theanine, and things like alternatives like paraxanthine. They're really good. They are going to work, but supporting blood flow to the brain, really working on synaptogenesis, boosting neuroplasticity. And my why behind creating that was for my dad. He was developing what I call early signs of Alzheimer's, repetition, like 4 or 5 times the same story. And I'm like, I think I know what this is. And my father's father, my grandfather, had Alzheimer's. So it's in our family. Like, I'm going to have to do something about this. So I look at all the natural ingredients that might help Alzheimer's. Ginkgo and bacopa, they're your no-brainers. Gotu kola is a naturopathic blood flow enhancer. It helps with varicose veins. Distally, but in the brain too, it can have some really good nootropic effects, and it helps, like, there's compounds in it which help protect neurons from like antioxidant effects. Huperzine A is one I spoke about that works, inhibitor of acetylcholine, so that helps with, boosting that, similar to how like alpha GPC that will provide the choline, but huperzine prevents the breakdown of acetylcholine. So those two together will work really well for boosting that one neurotransmitter. Working on the theory of type 3 Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes equals Alzheimer's, I included dihydroberberine, the upgrade to regular berberine to sort of stabilize blood sugars. Nacet is an ingredient I spoke about with you last time, the upgrade on NAC that can cross the blood-brain barrier, increase glutathione levels in the brain. Terrace still being fantastic for brain health, the active in, I believe, blueberries. Blueberries are very well studied for Alzheimer's as a functional food, and people, there's absolutely no reason, unless they're not organic, to just eat a heap of blueberries. Carnivores, don't at me. Blueberries are great. But then this is the point of difference, right? Like that product, and include lion's mane, as we spoke about before. If that's all you took, you're probably going to make some really good inroads into your brain health, in actually supporting brain health, in the structures, in the synapses, in the myelination of the brain. Whereas if you just take caffeine and theanine, there's nothing really in those compounds apart from, I guess, if it's from coffee, you get some of the constituents of coffee that might support it, but there's nothing that's actually working on the framework of the brain to support it and make it grow and help reverse any issues with it. So that's where the peptides will come in. Things like dihexa supports BDNF, BDNF being miracle grow for the brain. P21 is derived from cerebrolysin. So cerebrolysin is peptide isolated from animal brain tissue that's very, very powerfully, anecdotally, is helping reverse people conditions with Alzheimer's. I'm not claiming this will do it, but that is my overall thought process of, if I had Alzheimer's, this is the product that I would take and all the ingredients that I would use. And then CMAX is fantastic as a nootropic too. I included that, and there's some really good studies suggesting that it might help with that, as well as boosting BDNF. So boost BDNF, increase blood flow, and modulate neurotransmitters. Those are, you've asked how I formulate. Those were the 3 key targets. Oh, and then type 3 diabetes with the metabolic health of the brain. Those were the sort of the 4 or 5 targets that I had. And then I just formulated around that with what I found to be the best ingredients for that.
So with certain ingredients, the one I'm thinking of is huperzine. It has a very long half-life. It lasts in the body a long time. How do you recommend someone use this type of product, given that each of the substances are going to last for different durations?
With peptides, all peptides, I recommend cycling them, just because they will work on receptors. They will transcribe proteins. They'll do lots of things. But if you're constantly hitting that target, and even certain naturopathic things that aren't peptides, I recommend cycling things. I always think that's a good idea. Coffee being it's a different mechanism, but caffeine's going to be the same thing. Like if you bring it in and then take it out, it's going to continue to work better. Huperzine does have a long half-life. So it's not something you need to take every day. And I believe the effect of these things, if you were to take it for about a week and then take maybe 2 to 3 days off, that should be enough to resensitize the receptors for the peptides. And then like any issues with the huperzine A, then I feel like that possibly would offset that as well. Huperzine is one that I have not personally had any issues taking in for a prolonged period of time. And again, bioindividuality, take a Braverman test, see where your neurotransmitters are at, or even on like the Dutch test or the organic acids test, you can see your metabolites of your neurotransmitters to have a really good understanding of what your dopamine, your serotonin, your acetylcholine, your GABA, your glutamine, your histamine, all of these things that go into making your brain, making your personality who you are, seeing where they're all at. And my mate Lucas calls it cosmetic neurology, where you essentially get to play around with different compounds to alter each of these neurotransmitters for a period of time. for whatever favorable outcome you want. Maybe you want to be more sociable. You'll take things that increase GABA, like DHM is one of those things that we spoke about in the last one, that people will have alcohol because it reduces their social anxiety and it decreases inhibition. Like DHM will do that as well. Or you can take L-theanine, which will reduce your anxiety. But then if you want to again boost your dopamine to feel more confident and to have more drive, L-tyrosine, rhodiola, mucuna, they're all fantastic things you can bring in for a short period of time, or long if if it's not causing side effects. And again, this is like supplementation, like next level, and this extreme, I guess, biohacking supplementation does require you to be well in tune with your body and to not over rely on anything like qualia or neurogen or any of these nootropic mushrooms or anything like that. Like if you develop a dependence on it, then I don't feel like you're truly going at the upstream part of, you're not really targeting anything upstream. It's more of a green allopathy, a naturopathic band-aid for a bigger problem. So neuroregenerate's definitely not designed for daily use unless you've got a neurodegenerative condition that you're trying to either reverse or target. I take it when I do podcasts. I need my brain working. I want to come across intelligent and to share my ideas without having brain fog. So that's why I take that. And I do combine it with caffeine too. There's a synergy between all these ingredients, but I don't take it every day. I don't need to take it every day. If you do need to take it every day, then, work with a provider to target the why you need to take it every day and use that as a tool in your tool belt. But yeah, again, everything has its dose on that bell-shaped curve, including things like huperzine and the neuropeptides.
And including caffeine. And I think it's late over there for you, so I hope you didn't take any caffeine.
Early in the morning, it's perfect timing.
Oh, yeah. Okay, early in the morning. Gotcha. And then you keep referencing the importance of like assessing where you are, whether it's just like introspection or interoception of like knowing where you are, how does this affect you, positive or negative? Because you might use the clinical dose of whatever it is, but you have the genetics or the constitution, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't respond favorably. And in fact, no matter how much of this substance you use, you feel bad. So then you just don't continue using that substance. You mentioned Braverman test being one of them and the organic acids test, the OAT test as another. Are there any other things, whether it's a physical test you can do, an assessment, or things that you like to notice when you're experimenting with these compounds or stacks of multiple compounds?
Yeah, I'll broad level start with it. Like, how do I feel? Like actual interoceptive thought, like how do I feel? How's my energy today? That's cheap, free, and easy. Everyone can do that. If you feel terrible, then all right, we got some work to do. Easy intervention. Sorry, I didn't put the finger up at you. I was just showing my Aura ring. That's a great tool, or the Whoop band, or any sort of thing that can measure your sleep. If you've got HRV fluctuations, you've got a really low HRV, Aura ring even tells you your stress levels now. That's another really good tool that I think most people of your audience will have some level of metric or measurement of that. Annual blood tests are really important to see where you're tracking. When I last spoke to you, I constantly had liver issues despite having all these things because of ridiculous levels of toxic black mold that were in my environment. That, it's funny, you move out of one house into the next thinking, great, done, fixed, I'm out of this now, let's get it out. And then, you just look behind a wall or lift up the floor and like, oh, again. So mold's been a big problem for me, and homocysteine levels. There's just like, we are, as I said, for supplements in a golden age of supplements, but testing too. Like, it's never been easier. Companies like Ways to Well, for example, there's, I think, plenty of other ways that you can just get all the testing that maybe your doctor doesn't know about. And even there's so many functional medicine doctors out there now. In my bubble, I don't know for the layperson how easy it is to find someone like that. But organic acids tests for just like your general urine retest, very easy to do, rather expensive, but it gives you a very good, like, it's almost like taking your car to the mechanic and getting a progress, a overall systems report on how things are going. From that, it can tell you things like, all right, you've got some bacterial overgrowths, or maybe there's a bit of mitochondrial dysfunction, or you have issues with fatty acid metabolism. It'll say, well, your neurotransmitter, it'll give you a general advice on where your neurotransmitters are at, or Krebs cycle, all these other things. Like that one is a really great starting point. Blood tests are more cheap, but depending on how extensive you do it, they can be a fantastic resource. And I think they are important to stay on top of, especially when you're younger too, getting a good baseline for when your body's working, hopefully the best it's meant to, the best it should be. Dutch test, if people are having hormonal issues, a lot of women benefit tremendously from getting a Dutch test. It'll tell you not only where a full range of your hormones are at, but the metabolites of them and how it's clearing and how your body's metabolizing things like estrogens, 1, 2, and 3 estrogens. And then the metabolites, the 4, the 8s, and the 16s, like where you're at with all those is super important too. The Braverman test is like a free, it's because neurotransmitters are basically what your brain's doing. You can just take a test online. I think it's free. There's a version that makes you pay, but I like that one because it's free. It takes like 15, 20 minutes and you can get a really good sense of where you're at neurologically. And then, I guess that covers most of the basis, unless there's some I missed. Like if you've got gut issues, then maybe a microbiome test, a fecal microbiome test, which is a bit gross to do. But there's so many different ways we can figure things out and what's going on in our body now that I'm just like, great. I don't see there being anything that you can really miss if you know if you have a practitioner who has all the tools and knows all the testing that you can do for it. But again, like this is just a snapshot and a point in time. It's a very valuable snapshot, but what you do now versus what you do in 30 days time, they need to change. Like, because how you are going to intervene from what these tests say, there needs to be some level of follow-up. Like a mycotoxin test is something I've run 6 times now just to see where my level of mold toxin is, because that's been the biggest driver of all these other issues. And I've progressively seen it go down when we moved house, but then another one went up because a different species were in there. So, that being able to track it is very important. And then, it all works in together as a system. So when you do the blood test with the organic acids test, with the mycotoxin test, you've got a very clear picture, if you can understand it or if your practitioner can understand it, of where your health's at and, what supplements or what dietary intervention would be most appropriate for you based on those.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then I think also keeping, as you mentioned, also a subjective log of how you're doing, whether it's your energy levels, your stress, because you might see certain things show up quantitatively on your blood work, your Aura ring. It's not going to tell you how your mood was necessarily, or how your stress was, how your productivity was. But those things tend to matter a lot when you look back in hindsight. If your blood markers improved a bit, but now you feel depressed and you feel lethargic, it might not show up in your quantitative markers, but you'll notice it in your qualitative markers subjectively. So having the full range of the qualitative and the quantitative together paints a big high-level picture. And that is something that, like, the more data you have around it, obviously, the more informed your choices, the easier it is to tailor your interventions that you choose, whether they're supplements or something else.
Exactly right. That's what we refer to broadly as the health optimization, isn't it? We have all the tools and all the data, so it's why we're in a golden age of it now.
Exactly. Well, Kyal, we are going to continue on another episode that's going to come out next week. And if people want to connect with you, to check out the Level Up Health products, to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
Our website is leveluphealth.com, and Level Up Health on Instagram are the two pretty much exclusive ways to still, 2 years ago it was the same, to contact me and to see what the brand's doing. We have a newsletter now that's pretty active. Never had one until the last sort of 6 months. So we're always sharing information like this, but more like easy to digest. Just one email will tell you a little bit about huperzine or go to cola, or why we include DHM or PEA in our formulas. So between the newsletter, the website, and Instagram, that's the best way to keep tabs on what I'm and Level Up are doing.
Yep. And your newsletter I got today said that your pre-workout is robbing your gains. And so we're going to dissect that in the next one, because I stopped using pre-workouts for many years and I recently started. So stay tuned for that. If you guys want to try Level Up Health products, you can use the code URBAN, and I think that'll save you 15% on your order. And until next time, I'm Nick Urban here with Kyal Van Der Leest, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.